나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 Thus, what the Buddha transmitted was not the same. So the task of propagation after the extinction of Shakyamuni Buddha was limited according to the content of transmission. Hi everyone, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Very happy that you're here. If you're new here, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Find out about all of the free resources for your study, the website, the audio podcast, the bookstore, the Gohonzon store, the mandala store. Lots of ways to keep your mind occupied and increase confidence and surety in your practice. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We are continuing to read a letter to lay priest or lay monk Soya. I keep tripping over these translation biases, but I'm trying as I read it to catch them as I go. It's loaded, as so many of these Western English translations are, either by ignorance or by intent, with the false idea that these translations need to use old Western words in an effort to make the teachings more palatable. They actually mislead us because those words have a lot of charisma and they attach a lot of otherness to what should be in our practice, a complete focus on our experience of life. That's all we have. Anything outside of ourselves is magical, just not real. It's not our experience. It's a fallacy, and it actually is the foundation of what creates our stress and anxiety in life. So why would you use those words? Anyway, it's a constant frustration that I talk about often, so I won't bore you with the details again. I probably have some videos on this channel that you can look up on the home page with the little search area, not the top one, the search in the channel, and just look for bias, that key word, and you'll probably find a few videos where I talk about it in depth, if you're interested. All right, so we continue with this section, the Lotus Sutra and the Ages of the True and Semblance Dharmas. So he's talking about, from yet another angle, because we talk with Nichiren about basically the same stuff. You know, Nichiren is a monk. He's studied his whole life on the scholarship of Buddhism, of Shakyamuni's writings, the writings of his verbally transmitted sermons. Those writings come to Japan from various channels through China and India and Korea, and through various translations and languages. So there's a lot to study. And there's many references in the corpus of scholastic materials around Buddhism, referencing the 80,000 or the 84,000 teachings. It's just a really big number to impress upon the student this massive corpus of material to study from. And if we're to follow Shakyamuni's advice, the founder and creator of this modality of thought for accomplishing the maximal life without, or the liberation of, from the attachments, the magical thinking, the things that ultimately make us stressed out, anxiety filled, pain, emotional pain. Yeah. That we should study broadly all of the scholarship of Buddhism that we can find, even those non-Buddhists. But by non-Buddhists, he wasn't talking about every sect and religion in the world. He was talking about some who appropriate the teachings of Buddhism, or in India, the tremendous array of belief systems in the Hindu and so on and so forth, that have a ton of magical thinking, but also at their fundament that they're built on ancient Vedic texts and Brahmanism of different sorts, Jainism and so forth. The bottom line is, if you study the whole of Buddhism and the commentary and the scholarship, not the extraneous, but even that, even if you study stuff that's been dropped from the Buddhist canon, so to speak, you'll understand why it's dropped. You'll see why it doesn't belong. Because if you study everything, the core concepts of Buddhism are very simple and very straightforward. What's difficult is inculcating that direct experience into our human minds, which are, by the time period now especially, so incredibly pummeled with distractions and attachments, and consumerism is just the modern way of saying attachment. I mean, we wake up in the morning wondering what we need to purchase, what we need to buy. How can I go on another day with this 1-year-old telephone, or sorry, phone, smartphone? We don't call them telephones anymore. Whatever. We do the same thing with language, I suppose. It's amazing. If you just sat quietly for an hour and contemplate all of the influences in your life, which is going to require some honesty and some self-observation, yeah? And try to imagine how your average day, quote unquote, would be, slowly removing and analyzing, why do I do this most mornings? Or why in my gut right now do I feel like I'm missing something and I want to run to my computer for what? What do I absolutely have to connect with right now? What is so important that I check my this or that feed, or I see if I got any comments, or so on and so forth, or my this or that is wearing out and I need a replacement, or where in the world is my shipment from so and so, or did I get a note back from so and so, or it just goes on and on and on, right? And I think sitting on that, pondering these various interconnections, you'd have to come away with a sense of overwhelming influences, attachments, desires, needs that are based solely on habit. They're just habit energy. Why do I have to do this at this hour, at this time? Why do I have to do these things in this order? And then ask yourself, amongst all of that responsibility, where are you living, actually living? Or are you defining your living, your existence, by those activities? Yikes. In our age today, I find it truly alarming when I do that exercise, and I do it a lot. To analyze how much of my life is answering to attachments, responding to things that I don't create. Undoubtedly, I've changed it a lot over the last, during my whole lifetime. But although there was a period I recognize which was completely dedicated to amassing these attachments of being alive in this age. I've never been, and I should count myself lucky for not being naturally addictive. Not that I'm immune from it, but I've had my share of habits, but I seem to be able to break them quite as a matter of course, although it requires a decision, like all things in life. What part of this question would have to say, how aware am I of the decisions I'm making? You and I, not just me, is English. Anyway, so in terms of how aware we are of the way our life is driven by this massive collection of ideas of identification, right? Because a lot of what we want, a lot of what we shop for, a lot of what we associate with people and things has to do with the way that we think we are perceived, including our own perception of self, right? And that's the bottom line, is that everything we do, everyone we associate with, everywhere we go, how we live, what our house looks like, what our tent looks like, whatever, the clothes we wear, the deodorant we use, is all tied to our sense of self, our identification in the world, the realm of self that we're trying to somehow find, emulate, create, right? That whole formation, that massive energy that we're constantly manipulating and inculcating and establishing. And Shakyamuni was acutely aware of this. To the point where he identified that it was that very thing, that very self, that identification, which you couldn't find an organ in the body that was creating it or manifesting it. It all occurs in the mind, this emergent property of this whole amazing physical apparatus that is the universe, really. But as we identify self, this particular set of circumstances, instantiations, produces a particular mind with its own foibles and attachments and constraints and constructs. And he thought, well, all of those things are fundamentally the basis for all of our stress, our anxieties, our pain. If we could go ahead, have the experience. It's samsara. You're here. That's things are working. The universe, the life, all of it, it's happening. It's not a denial of what's happening. It's, you ever notice how some people will go through what appears to be the exact same thing as somebody else, but they react ballistically different? I say ballistically because some people act ballistic, right? I mean, I have habit energies that I learned, maybe, I don't know about learned, but this is a tricky part. But my father and my relatives, my male relatives in my young upbringing, were very formative in my idea of what it is to be a man. And I found throughout my life where, quite to my surprise, at many times, I was behaving in the same way. So did I learn that from them? Or was that karma that I shared with them? Was it all my karma? Yeah, I've come to understand that karma is tendencies and conditions. So the karma that forms me and that I identify certain traits with is a construction of the karmas, not only the karmas, the energies available to me, but my own wanting to belong to, in life in general, the qualities, not only from my relatives, but on television, in movies, in books, at school, and my sifting through the degree to which I want to emulate, identify with. And I've had to backtrack on a lot of that because a lot of those habit energies, as I grew and matured, and certainly through Buddhism, I viewed as very non-life affirming. They were very troublesome. They caused me stress and anxiety, and I was creating it. But it's hard to change habit energy, isn't it? Yeah, even food, which I have a problem with, obviously. And being diabetic, I am made critically aware of the problem I have with food. Problems I didn't know I had. Yeah? So there we go. Awareness. How aware are we of what our body actually needs? How our mind is controlling that whole idea, quite below the radar of our conscious awareness, right? Start looking at that engine of who you are versus what's in control. And here we have the Buddhist analysis, the Buddhist insight, the Buddhist way of taking control by using that great facility of mind to truly understand this amazing matrix of identification. And that's the level, the way Shakyamuni taught Buddhism. He said, first of all, we need to get with the program and understand what the heck is going on in our lives. Are we just plummeting through life? Don't we have more control over it than that? Can we not be an objective observer of our subjective reality? Can we not influence it to maximize it, to at least minimize our sense of, right, despair, loneliness, emotions, all of it? Can't we just put things in a perspective that's much more life-affirming and a bigger picture kind of life? That if we could lift all of these little and major oppressions that are created by ourselves, if we could lift them so that we could just observe the process and that magnificence of that process, could that not provide for a life of much greater appreciation and wonder and love and being fulfilled without constantly smashing the limits of that and breaking the china and the glass, if you will, because of struggling with desires and wants and things that are not needed, but created as needs because of our attachments. If we could break loose of the idea that we must, can't lose. Well, loss and accrual, it's all a part of the mechanism from which we're instantiated. Instead of having fear of losing something, having a greater appreciation and love and inculcating everything we can from it and sharing it certainly is a much better perspective to have that would make us happier, more fulfilled in expressing this magnificent potential that we're constantly manifesting, instead of beating ourselves into a corner because we're so concerned about losing it or gaining enough of it, right? It's that whole having and losing, and where do we learn to do that? I mean, think of a little baby wanting to grab everything and put it in its mouth. That's how we are throughout our lives. Sounds funny maybe, but truly, that's an irony, because in Buddhism we realize that if it were not for that tremendous desire to be, to have a life, there'd be no reason for sentient or insentient beings to be. There'd be no reason for the universe to expand, to create, construct anything. That all fundamentally comes from that tremendous desire to be. But it's almost as though if we could only, once we reached maturity, whenever that is, what, age 3, age 9, age ever, that at some point we could switch that off or throttle it back to the point where, okay, I am being, you relax, you're here. Wow, look at all of this being. Because everything is being. Nothing is, statically is. You share moments, so it looks like is, but it's is changing. Everything is changing. And this is our situation. So if we can realize and flow along with everything else, this instantiation of potential engine, it becomes quite wonderful, quite amazing. You have, instead of desire for, you have anticipation of. It's a whole different feeling, right? It's as different as watching a burglar go through your house and your anticipation on the eve of your birthday or a celebration, or right? I mean, how different are your emotions then? But they come from the same place. It's only a matter of how you experience them. I mean, think about it. What if you could watch on your cell phone a video of a burglar going through and stealing everything in your house with a feeling of Christmas morning for you Christmas people. Yeah? Can you? I know. Sounds weird, doesn't it? But this is what we're saying. So, back to Nichiren. He's trying to explain that this is how Shakyamuni had to teach people. What do I mean, this is how? I mean that he had to teach in steps for people to self-analyze, to see how their mind was working, how their minds controlled their bodies, how their bodies controlled their minds, how others controlled their minds, how their minds influenced others. The whole game is in the mind here. It's about attitude and intent. Buddhism is a science of the mind, an experiential science, an observational science. Not chemistry, not biology, right? Not paleontology. Just look at the mechanisms of identity and how your mind works with that, and understand that you, with that very mind, can alter your perception toward awakening your true participatory manifestations moment to moment in this life engine of the universe that we all are part of, yeah? So Nichiren is trying to describe now why many would question, why wasn't the Lotus Sutra, if that's the maximal practice, why didn't he teach that from day one, and why wasn't everyone doing it? Well, because you're not understanding that the time you live in is quite distinctly different from the time 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. People evolve. Mental processes evolve. Our ability to reason evolves. That's just the way it is. That's the process. So, seeing that clearly, Shakyamuni backed off from his original, hey, look what enlightenment looks like, and everyone going, what? Right? He didn't teach that very long because nobody could understand what he was talking about. Well, it sounds nice. You know, what do we pray to? No. You missed it. Okay, let me start from scratch. And so this is the Hinayana. And then the more evolved sutras, and more evolved, till finally he gets back to where he wanted to be in the first place. The Lotus, self-realization. Yeah. So, and it's in the expedient means, the teachings themselves, that is what he's doing. But it's easy to miss, especially if you're in it. So this is what Nichiren is going to talk about now. The Lotus Sutra within those earlier times, and why wasn't it the teaching, although it was talked about, why wasn't it the focus of the teaching in those periods? Follow? After entrusting the essential dharma of the Myoho Renge-kyo to the bodhisattvas who appeared from under the ground, this is the story in the Lotus Sutra, right? Chloe, oh my God, that poor dog has such a hard time breathing sometimes. Sorry. After he did that, the Buddha ascended from the stupa of treasures. That's the story in the Lotus Sutra that weaves throughout, really, although there's a chapter dedicated to it. This really what Nichiren's brilliant mind conceived of as this mandala. The treasure tower, again, as a reminder, and I've talked about this before, is our very life. Not this body, although embodied in this life, in this manifestation that you are, that I am, is it the very construction of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo is the treasure tower. Why? Visualize Namu as your mind being present and invoking. Namu. Now, Myo is that conception, that construction, right, that I've been talking about, that formation, then instantiates brain, head, whole, right? And it manifests of this instantiation of the body, the apparatus, Renge, instantly as it manifests becomes its manifestor, moment to moment, right? A constant creative act. Kyo, the understanding of that whole pyramid of selfness. You ever thought about Daimoku that way? This is the treasure tower. Built on the apparatus of the universe, tendencies and conditions amass uncountable, innumerable energies to manifest moment to moment from all potential, all possible potential. These tendencies and conditions, this karma manifests as this apparatus, brain, consciousness, self, organs, the whole apparatus, the earth, the food, the animals, the trees, this whole apparatus coming up through your feet all the way up into your mind, which is not an organ, but an emergent concept from, or energy, or process from this apparatus to witness it, to judge it, to manipulate it, to observe it, all of it. The consciousnesses are in the mind. The apparatus for the consciousnesses are eyes, ears, skin, tongue, so on and so forth, right? So, after giving the task in the Lotus Sutra to you and I to propagate this understanding, this insight of Myoho Renge Kyo, Shakyamuni Buddha in the story elevates outside of that, because universe, yeah? And standing in the sky, in other words, hovering through all reality, the Buddha tapped the heads of Manjushri, Avalokitesvara, the king of the Brahma heaven, Indra, and the sun and moon. See, he's everywhere, so he can tap heads everywhere. The four heavenly kings, the other and others 3 times, and entrusting them with the expanded and concise teachings of the Lotus Sutra, though without the essential Dharma, because people have to enter the gate, have to enter the Honzon, the emergent property of mind. They have to enter within that property of mind the Buddha observation platform. Yeah? But they can't do that if they don't understand the path, which is individual to each and every one of us, because we're all, although we're a huge roiling mass of instantiations of energies, we're not all identical. We all experience and gain insights uniquely. We can share insights, and from the sharing, gain a further insight. That's the nature of the mind. There's no limit to how large the mind can grow. And ultimately, the mind is the universe, when it's seen through its potential Buddhahood, which we then can be informed by and live a much more immense life experience. That's Buddhahood. There's Buddhaness and there's Buddhahood. How do we, with our constant insight-making machine, perceive life through Buddhaness? So it wouldn't be incorrect to talk about your Buddhahood, my Buddhahood, right? Because the hood part is the path to, but the destination is the same. Many in body, one in mind. As well as all the sutras preached before and after the Lotus Sutra. This was for the sake of saving the people, or enlightening, awakening the people in the 2,000-year period of the ages of the true Dharma and the semblance Dharma. Thereafter, when the Buddha preached the Nirvana Sutra, he again expounded the Lotus as well as the pre-Lotus Sutras, entrusting them to such great bodhisattvas as Manjushri. This was the preaching regarding the benefit of gleaning after the harvest of the Lotus Sutra. Right? It's kind of like you got to a cul-de-sac here. You got to the Lotus Sutra, and you've learned and you've trained your mind. If you look for insight into who and what and how you are, but now you've overshot a little bit. Let me bring you back to what you need to do with all of this knowledge, this experience, this insight. And that is the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Follow? Thus, what the Buddha transmitted was not the same. So if you follow literally what is being transmitted and who his audience is when he transmits it, this is the key to the scholarship. Because then you understand these different stepping stones. It may all from a distance, without focus, without concentration, all seem to be talking about the same thing. And in general, you wouldn't be wrong. But the specificity is what discerns one before another, one greater than another. What is the culminating teaching versus what are the stepping stones? If you can't tell the difference between those, then the likelihood is that you're going to miss your opportunity for Buddhaness, yeah? You have to get things in the proper perspective. Isn't that the whole practice? Accordingly, Kasyapa, Ananda, and others spread only the Hinayana Sutras, because that was the nature of transmission of the teachings in those earlier teachings. Without expanding the Mahayana Sutras, Nagarjuna, Asanga, and others spread the provisional Mahayana Sutras without preaching the one vehicle, true teaching of the Lotus Sutra, because that's what was appropriate to the time. Even though they preached the Lotus Sutra, they merely suggested its teaching, or they preached merely a part of the theoretical section without discussing the beginning and ending of the Buddha's guidance, the original state of the universe. I mean, that's a big, big thought moment to perceive the universe. The people weren't capable then, so they had to work on their own worlds, their own realms, right? Appearing in this world as the avatars of Avalokitesvara and Medicine King Bodhisattva, Grandmaster Nanrei, and Tendai expounded both the Hinayana and Mahayana Sutras, provisional and true teachings, the theoretical and essential sections of the Lotus Sutra, as well as such doctrines as the beginning and ending of the Buddha's guidance and the eternal relationships between the Buddha and his disciples. Moreover, they advocated the theory of sutras which has been preached, are being preached, and will be preached, claiming that the Lotus Sutra was supreme among all of the teachings by the Buddha in the lifetime of Shakyamuni Buddha. But they didn't differentiate them very well. They taught them well, but they didn't really demonstrate, right, the superiority of one over the other. They tried. Tendai certainly tried. But he didn't give anyone an anchor. He just gave methodologies for perceiving this truth of the teachings, not of the actualization of the teaching itself. It's tricky. Their critical classification of teachings is superior to those of commentators in India and many masters in China. Tripitaka masters, both old and new translations, do not equal to Nanyue and Tendai at all. Founders of both exoteric and esoteric Buddhist schools cannot compete with them. The two grand masters, however, were still basing themselves on the whole or parts of the Lotus Sutra without expanding its essence. The characters, Myoho Renge-kyo. Chanting happened long before Nichiren, don't forget. But it wasn't properly taught as the end point itself, as the container of all that led up to it. It was only a recitation of deep respect and honor for the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, and including all of the teachings that led up to it. But it didn't specifically call out that the teaching of the Lotus Sutra was itself the method for realization. It hadn't quite identified it that way yet, because it wasn't the time. People wouldn't be able to go, oh, that's what I do. That's the method. They still had to go through this arduous training and teaching and learning, right? They just had to. Otherwise, they would drift. Although they themselves knew it, they did not convey this to others, because in their depth of scholarship, they understood when they upheld the superiority of the Lotus Sutra. They understood the significance of it, but they didn't teach it that way. It was solely because they correctly remembered that it was entrusted to them and respected that what the Buddha had in mind, because it was entrusted, that essence was instructed or bequeathed to the bodhisattvas of the underground, the future, those that would come into existence in this age. They're following Shakyamuni's mandate. Grandmaster Dengyo was born in Japan 1800 years after the passing away of the Buddha, toward the end of the age of the semblance Dharma, and clearly discriminated among the precepts of the Hinayana, Mahayana, One Vehicle Lotus Sutra. He refuted 250 precepts of the Hinayana against the specific precepts of the Brahmanet Sutra and the Necklace Sutra. Dengyo also confuted the precepts of the various Mahayana sutras, which were analogous to royal subjects, by the power of the perfect and sudden Mahayana precepts for the Lotus Sutra and the Sutra of Meditation on the Bodhisattva Universal Sage, the great king of all precepts. How to work, as the Lotus Sutra is a great training manual for how to be the ultimate Bodhisattva, to gain Buddhaness and course through the world as a great Bodhisattva. He thus established on Mount Hiei the great precepts dais, which had never existed in the whole world except on Mount Sacred Eagle, where Shakyamuni Buddha preached the Lotus Sutra for 8 years. Thus, the followers of the 8 Buddhist schools in Japan all abandoned their false teachings to become disciples of Grandmaster Dengyo. They had a great revolution, but it wasn't quite the right time, so it didn't last. When Dengyo passed away, corruption soon ensued, and your favorite flavors, Chikaku and so forth, from Subakarashima onward, that Shingon school and many other schools, they just took over. Because the people just weren't ready to hang on to that depth of experience, that depth of teaching. It's lamentable, but Shakyamuni knew this would happen. Among followers of the Sanran, the 3 discourses, and the Jojitsu, the completion of reality, sects, brought into Japan by Kanroku, the Hoso, Dharma characteristics, and Kosa sects transmitted from China, and Dosho, the Kigan flower garland sect, transmitted from Roben, the Ritsu sect brought by Venerable Chen, and disciple of Grandmaster Kobo, there existed no one who did not observe the perfect and sudden Mahayana precepts. One who goes against these precepts is an enemy of one's teacher. Those who accept with conviction the perfect and sudden Mahayana precepts are followers of the Grandmaster Dengyo. Perhaps this is what Venerable Eshin meant when he declared in his Essentials of the One Vehicle teachings, "The Japanese people are all equipped with the capacity to understand and accept the perfect teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Without social and regional differences, the people in Japan are of one mind in putting conviction in the One Vehicle teaching of the Lotus Sutra." So, this has been a different sort of a video. I hope you got something from it. I hope that cleared something up. We're going to continue with this letter, the next section being the fallacies of various schools and masters. And so he's going to dig into that whole thing again from this new perspective of the teachings from Shakyamuni and the differences of the various levels of teachings and how those who are looking to gain fame, fortune, whatever, are able to manipulate earlier teachings because they speak to a less evolved understanding of Buddhism to manipulate them to their own gains, because they really can't do that with Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That's so clearly self-instantiating, right? That's the ultimate method that Shakyamuni provided, so that anyone, regardless, you don't need an organization, no need a group. We just need to experience for ourselves this gradual release and liberation from the things that cause us suffering, anxiety, stress, so on and so forth. And you're doing it, you're practicing. So, hella good on you. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. You're awesome. And the only way I could think of you being more awesome is for you to subscribe to this channel. Sorry. This is the whole YouTube thing, and the way things work sometimes drives me nuts. But truly, if we can get the algorithms of YouTube, which is our sharing medium right here, to recognize how many of us are commenting or subscribing to this oeuvre of study, it somehow in the algorithms pushes it out, makes it more available, moves the search algorithm so that we appear more often to more people. Well, then that's bodhisattva work. So thank you for helping that happen. Please participate in that way. It's hugely important for all of us. And the world, but yeah, the world is in deep need of cleansing perspectives, yes. We just lost Mr. Abe from Japan to a shooter in Japan, which is no small feat because getting a gun in Japan is very difficult. Anyway, I don't want to get to a downer. I just want to appreciate you guys. Use all the resources that I've put out there to help support your practice, and our patrons, you guys on through patreon.com/TLK, through paypal.me/SifuSylvain. Even I've gotten checks mailed to the Kun here. All of you guys, however you can support this effort, I am deeply, deeply indebted to your generosity. And as a result, all of us here in this Sangha online are thankful for your support. And I'm thankful for everyone's support, like I said, even just watching these or downloading the podcasts, liking, subscribing. It's immense. It's part of the practice. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing that. And I look forward to moving on and reading more. And if you have suggestions, by the way, for maybe it's a particular Gosho that you weren't able to find. We have like 750 videos on this channel. So you can look for it by title in the search again. If you're not finding what you want to find, email me or comment, and I'll either find the links for you or it'll be fodder for a new video. And I will make sure that I address your needs for study. Okay? Thanks again. I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.